My superpower is engineering. I've been a roboticist almost all my life now. I think engineering is just as creative as the arts. Engineers, we solve problems. It impacts the world. It makes a difference. Without IEEE, I don't think I would have the network that I have. Anyone can get involved with IEEE-USA at any time. There's an immense amount of value for anyone at any career stage.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to today's IEEE-USA Livestream webinar, Career Transitioning 101, First Steps. IEEE-USA's goal is to create programming that's valuable, relevant, and of interest to you. As such, we will be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. We value your opinion and would appreciate if you could take a few minutes to share your thoughts. I will now pass it off to our presenter for today's webinar, Dr. Bob Danielle, who is an expert in the areas of organizational behavior, career transitioning, leadership development, and is also author of IEEE-USA's 5-part ebook series on career transitioning, of which today's presentation is based on. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thanks for everyone here joining us today on IEEE-USA's webcast. I'm excited to be here. I'm going to start with a little bit, a few things about myself. To be honest, I wasn't really in love with the picture that I actually shared for a profile picture. So this is me. I do live in the Northwest, but this is not a Northwest picture. I'm up in the Seattle area where it's actually sunny today, which makes the lighting in here a lot better. I've had multiple career transitions, throughout my professional career, and I began my career really right out of high school. So I was what you would call a late bloomer. Most of my education, in fact, all of my education was achieved and earned while I was in my 30s, 40s, and 50s. So it's been kind of a journey for me, and that's why I bring up the fact that I've been a lifelong learner. I feel like that has really been a really kind of key and an important part of allowing me not just a career transition, but also to be working in multiple careers, throughout the time I have been working. Finally, this is one of the things that I will promise you up front is that I'm a strong believer that simple is better. I'm not going to throw out like multi-syllable words. I'm not going to throw out, these exorbitant concepts that, it's going to take a degree or multiple degrees to understand. I believe in common sense type of approach, which I believe is very relatable, very real, and actually very executable. So with that being said, I'm going to just kick into the agenda. So very standard, agenda. We'll just go through these different parts here. I'm not a person that likes to read slides. The thing that I will point out is that we're going to go through, what it takes to do a personal SWOT analysis. There's some terminology I changed there a little bit. Anyone who's ever done a business SWOT analysis will understand the concept. And even if you haven't, this is just really another way of taking inventory of the things that you actually can bring to the table and use as transferable skills from one career to another. We'll finish with next steps, additional resources, and ultimately Q&A. A couple of things I just want to point out right from the very beginning. I just want to set expectations. Number one, when you think about career transitioning, I don't want you just to think about just going from one career to another or one industry to another. A career transition can happen in your own organization. It could be either, an upward move, it could be a lateral move, it could be a downward move. I have actually done all three of those and have had success in all these different shapes, ways, and forms. The other piece I want to say is that I'm going to try to keep this both informative and entertaining. The last thing I wanted you to do is to walk away from here with nothing, right? And so my goal is to have you get at least one or two really good things that you can actually use in your day-to-day activity, especially for something that's really as important as a career transition, and those things like your professional journey and all those other pieces that go along the way. So, and finally, I wasn't born in the Northwest, so I do have a little northeast in me, so I speak a little fast. So if the pace is a little bit too quick, please drop something in the chat and I will slow it down. There's going to be a couple of sections, especially in the SWOT analysis, that I'll pause for any questions, but ultimately you can save your questions to the end. So that being said, I will take a deep breath and let's just go to the first part of the presentation. So the first bullet here is really about you. Okay, I want you to understand that this is a very personal experience. A lot of times when we talk about, career transitioning and actually careers overall, there is a tendency to kind of, want to have others have a little bit of a part in it, a little bigger part than probably we really need to have. Ultimately, this is a promise or something that you have to keep for yourself. So I want you to kind of keep this in mind as we kind of go through the presentation, that realistically, and really where it works the best is if you just take that I don't advocate for this, you take a very selfish approach, meaning that you use this as an opportunity to take care of you. And that being said, there's two umbrella pieces on it. And the first piece that falls under this umbrella is you really need to find or surround yourself with people who not only believe in you, but will also tell you the things that you don't want to hear. Now, on the slide, I say, tell you that there's something in your teeth. But reality, what I'm looking for, what you should be looking for, is someone or a group of individuals that are invested in your success, right? That when they do share feedback with you, they're not doing it to criticize, they're actually doing it to help. And more importantly, they're going to tell you sometimes things that you really don't want to hear. And I think that's really important. I've been fortunate in my career path where I've had those folks in my life. And, some of them have been friends, some of them have been family, some of them have just been acquaintances, networks that I've met along the way. And it's really helped me, kind of shape and direct and actually manage, not only my expectations of myself, but the things that I may have to do in order to achieve the goals that I set forth. And sometimes what you'll find is that, that necessarily has to be someone that's a relative or a really close friend. It can be somebody that's just a casual acquaintance. And for those of you that don't feel like you have that in your life or are struggling to find that, I would say use your network. I mean, the IEEE-USA is a big network. And one of the things that I've learned, not just through my own professional journey, but also through some research I've done on this subject, is that successful people or people that have had relevant success in their lives love to talk to others about it. They like to pay it forward. And so you'd be surprised, doing things like information interviews and reaching out to someone even on LinkedIn or even through this event, that they'll be happy to talk to you and give you some guidance on what they have learned along the way and want to share with you. And if you're uncomfortable with that or just feel a little uneasy, you can reach out to me. I leave my contact number and information at the end of this presentation. I have talked to numerous people. I was fortunate enough to have people in my life that helped me along the way. And one of the ways that I honor them is to pay it forward. So I offer you that. The secondary piece, and I ask this question, is that are you ready to own your career path? And so this is a very interesting concept. So I will start by just asking out loud, and you can put information in the chat if you like, is who do you believe owns your career path? And I'll wait like 30 seconds to see if anything comes in the chat. So the question is that who do you believe owns your career path? Okay, so we may have a couple of shy folks in here. So let me tell you this. When this question is asked in the workplace, there was some research and some surveys done on it. The majority of employees said that their employer owns their career path. And the majority of employers said that the employees own their career path, which is very interesting when you think about it, right? And what even makes this even more a little bit, I would say, challenging and interesting is that the percentages weren't 100%, meaning that employers didn't say that 100% of this is owned, their career is owned by the employee. And the employee did not say that the 100% of their career is owned by their employer, which really kind of begs yourself to ask the question is that, what do we have perceptions or misperceptions about ownership? And so one of the things I like to do to kind of work around this and actually set us in a good place is to do an example that I like to share, which is about renting a car. So I don't know if you've ever rented a car or you know someone who rented a car. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions. And so here's the first question. Do you wash a rental car? I mean, the outside or the inside, do you clean it? Okay. Number 2, do you change the oil in a rental car? Do you change the starter? Do you change the brakes? Do you fit, do you replace the battery? You might change the tire if you get stuck, but do you change any of these things? Do you fix any of these things? And the third question I ask is that, do you personalize the rental car? Do you put something from the rearview mirror? Do you put those little, sun creatures that, move around? I have one right here. Do you do any of those things? And I suspect that you probably answered at least no to 2 of those questions, which means that you have a pretty good idea of the difference between renting and owning, okay? And just to kind of clarify things, just kind of put it into perspective, renting, even though it may be something in your possession or something that you have access to, it's not really yours, okay? It's someone else's. And in a lot of ways, it's like being a passenger in a car that someone else is driving, obviously, and they're just taking you where they want to and not necessarily where you want. It's a very kind of transactional relationship, and there's really no control. You have to stop and start when other people, want to, as opposed to when you want to. Now, ownership, actually looks and feels a little differently, right? Not only, when you take ownership of something, there's a sense of pride and a sense of accomplishment. You have a hop in your step. Standing tall, you're looking good, you don't let other people finish your sentences. But more importantly, when you own something, you're the driver of that car, right? And so where you want to go is where you go. You take that car left or right, up or down, wherever it is. And that is the kind of the motivation, or that is the vehicle in which you take along your career path. So very key concepts here, right? And if you want to hang on any particular part of this presentation, please hang on this particular slide, right? Begins with you. Surround yourself with people who are invested in your future, and then own it. Own it from top to bottom, from beginning to end, and I think that you're going to be A-okay. Now, to help us, figure out, or what I like to call take an inventory of your skills, your transferable skills, I like to use what I call a personal SWOT analysis. Now, this is very similar to a business SWOT analysis, except I changed a couple of words and a couple of sections because I just don't like the words weaknesses and threats. And I will tell you that when you do this, you could do it 1 or 2 ways. There's actually more ways than that. You can actually go online and get a template for this. And if you're a person that's more comfortable typing, that's one way to do it. I will tell you that personally, how I like to do it is I actually like to take sheets of paper and write on each sheet, each one of these categories. I find that when I write it, it kind of sticks with me a little bit and it becomes a little more personal. And I like that because this actually is a personal exercise. So the 4 sections that we'll kind of go through are strengths, which you obviously, get a good understanding what that is. I don't like the word weaknesses because I find that the human brain really can't comprehend the negative. So I like areas for improvement. So I sometimes vacillate between those 2 things. Opportunities are just that. And instead of threats, I like to think of things of challenges. And so as you begin this process, and we're going to go through each one of these sections, if you're a little bit unsure on how to start, I always ask folks to just think about these 3 questions when you're going through each one of these particular sections, right? What's working? Where are you stuck? And what would you do differently? So I'm going to pause a little bit and see if there's any questions or in chat, and I'll do the 3-second rule. Okay. So the first one I'm going to go talk about, this first section is strengths. Now, this should be your biggest section. Okay, this should be obviously, I mean, it's not obviously, but this should be your biggest section. The reason is because I like to really focus on what people do well. And and it also could be a little bit of a tricky section because sometimes folks rely on those things that they actually get paid for. And I will tell you that there is a lot of strengths that you may have that you're not getting paid for, whether it's through volunteering, whether it's through stuff that you do in the home, anything and everything, regardless of whether or not you're receiving compensation for, that you do really, really well should be considered a strength. And this is some categories you want to think about inside of that, okay? So what do you do better than anybody else? You know, what differentiates you from someone else? Now, if you're not sure about that, that's where these folks that you have in your life that you can talk to and ask them. But I wouldn't necessarily rule out anything. So if you're writing or typing, start putting those down on a piece of paper or again, inside of a document. The other thing to think about is, what do other people see are your strengths? And this is why it's important to have those kind of support folks in your life, because they're going to tell you some things that you may not be aware of. I mean, I will tell you that in my professional career, my personal life, there are some things that I just take for granted that I do that a lot of people see as strengths, and I wouldn't even recognize them as that. So this is not just about not you being aware of them. It's also what other people see, which is really important. And that's why you should really take the time to ask folks that really know you really well what they see. And then what are you really proud of? What are those accomplishments that the things that you have done? Again, don't worry about whether or not you've gotten paid for it or not. It's things that when you kind of sit and think about a situation and you can refer back to something, what does that look like? What would that look like on a piece of paper? How does that make you stand out among others? And I think that's really kind of the important piece of that. So I'm going to pause here. Are there any questions in chat right now, or anybody have anything? I have another screen, so if I'm looking up there to see if I can see anything. Okay. Moving on. So I like to call these areas for improvement. I don't really like the word weaknesses. I think it just creates kind of a negative connotation for people, and then you start to have a tendency to takes you down different paths. So what are the areas, what skills do you have that you would like to have that you're missing, experiences or knowledge gaps, right? What do you think that you lack now to be where you want to be? And even if you don't know where you want to be, what are the things that you're missing? So, you know, in this pandemic, a lot of folks realize that they, you know, really should have a better grasp or a better, a little more experience in presenting virtually. It was difficult enough to present live because the fear of speaking in public is probably one of the greatest fears. But presenting virtually is not necessarily very comfortable for some folks. So that may be that. But there could be skills, there could be experiences. If you're not tech savvy, if you find yourself that you need additional skills, whether it'll be in any of the office products, or if it's more technical or vocational skills, that would fall at. Knowledge gaps could be about anything, and experience is a little bit difficult to kind of, get overnight by reading a book, because you actually have to do it. But it's good to note that. And this is really about what could you or want to do better. So what are the things that, if you had the opportunity, what would you want to learn, or what would you want to do, or what would you want to gain that could be something that could take you from where you currently are to where you might want to be. Another way to look at this is, are there things that you just avoid? Things that you don't do just because you don't feel confident in, you're not comfortable in. Using the virtual presentation example, that may be some things that would come to mind, things that you might want to take into consideration. I know for me personally, even though I use Excel and spreadsheets, and I work a lot in that, pivot tables sometimes are a little bit challenging for me. So I often put that down. Data analytics, another area, are even though I like data analysis, I really probably could use a little bit more knowledge and experience in that. This could be even skills, whether if you're engineering, is it is it the technical pieces that are causing you some challenge? Is it that the hands-on? If you're working, if you're working with boards, you're working with programming. Where is those things that you feel like if you had could wave the magic wand, you would like to get better at? And then the other piece of it, again, this is referring back to this concept that you have support folks in your life, or at least someone, a mentor, a friend, a coworker, where other people see for areas of improvement. Now, I will tell you with me, one of the things that I learned, and things I probably should have been cognizant of, is that I have a tendency not to let people complete their sentences. It's not that I'm trying to be rude. It's just that I feel like I think I know what they're going to say, which is actually a bad thing. So, I often get that feedback, like, maybe you should just wait a little bit. Can you just pause? And so I work on that. I've gotten better with it over the years. I built in some kind of, triggering that just says, hey, just take a deep breath, let them speak, let them finish. And it really has helped me over the last couple of years kind of make that transition. But I might have made the change on my own, but the reality is that what I found is that having others talk me through that really helped me kind of want to change that behavior, right? Those actions, and make some kind of sizable improvement. So I'll pause. Seeing any questions, I will go to the next section. So here we talk about opportunities, and I would say of all the sections, the opportunity section is probably the most difficult for some folks to fill out, or to actually put pen to paper. And one of the reasons for that is because as this quote says, is that opportunities are very much like apparitions. They're like unicorns. They disappear. They're like chameleons. Sometimes you see them, sometimes you don't. I will tell you that for the most part, they're all around us. Sometimes we just don't recognize them. And a lot of times they're right in front of us. We just don't see them. And so the one thing that I would tell you is that just be open-minded. And really sometimes there's a kind of a terminology, it's Occam's razor, right? Sometimes the things that are the most obvious and the most closest to you are the things that we miss. So just be very cognizant of the fact that opportunities are really all around you. You just may not be seeing them. You may be fixated on one thing and not necessarily seeing what's right in front of you. And so the one thing I often ask, and this is a great help, is that do you have a network of strategic contacts, right? And this is kind of key. It can be in addition to that support network, but this is a group of individuals that you have rapport with. There's an interactivity with, I'm not talking about, Facebook friends or LinkedIn connections where you've got, hundreds, if not thousands of them, and you don't know anybody, maybe, 5 or 6 of them. These are folks that you really are connected with, that you've maintained a connection with, and it's bi-directional, meaning that it's not just you reaching out, it's them reaching out. And one of the reasons why this is really important, especially when we're talking about opportunities, is that 70% of all jobs, 70% of them, if not more of them, never make it to the Indeeds of the world, the Glassdoors of the world, the job boards of the world, right? A lot of these are internal situations where somebody knows that something is going to happen. And by staying in contact and having this really tight-knit network of strategic contacts, you have an opportunity here to not just to find more work for yourself, but also, on the flip side, help other folks as well. Your organization, whether you've got your own company or not, even if you've got a challenging problem, this is a great opportunity to use this both ways. Again, I don't like one-directional, or I like bi-directional relationships. So this is where you might find out more opportunities than you could possibly imagine. The other piece of it is that how well do you know your industry, your market, your organization, right? Is there a current need in there right now? Is there something that's going to happen, a trend that you're recognizing, something that maybe no one else is taking advantage of, or no one is looking at? And one of the things that was very interesting in some research I read is that 6 or 7 of the 10 hottest jobs right now didn't exist 5 to 7 years ago. Think about that. So these are things that that no one really was paying attention to. And all of a sudden now they're one of the highest, one of the most high demand positions. And that's what's really important about opportunities, is that it takes a little bit of work. And I have wrote a second book in my series, and it's really focused on opportunities, because taking advantage of opportunities does take a little bit of work, right? You've got to put yourself in a position to be open to them and to see them. But this is one way that you may be able to, get ahead of the curve a little bit. The last one is that, does your organization offer training, or educational benefits? One of the biggest things that I've learned throughout my career, and also, while I've been doing research and actually writing books on this, is that a lot of folks are not aware of the benefits that may be available for the vocational or educational training, right? If you have any college or any prior learning credits, universities will often look at those at no charge and let you know how they may apply to a degree program or certificate program, thus saving you some money and time. And so this is really important for a lot of folks that that may not be aware that there are educational vocational benefits. I know that, I work for a university. We do a lot of this. This is a lot of work that I do. You will be surprised about the types of benefits that are available to employees, and they're not even aware of it. And so this is just an opportunity, one, to save some money. And if you have some prior learning, credits, and prior learning credits can be prior learning experiences. Sometimes your organization has training programs, and those training programs are very organized, and there's a very formality to it. Some of that material may be used towards an educational degree, especially if you've gone to college and you have some credits out there that need to be attached to something. Again, this is a great opportunity for you to get that, get that next level of training, experience, certificates, post-secondary credentials that you need without that cost, or not all the cost and all the time on your end. So I'm going to pause. There was a lot of information there. Any questions? Please don't be shy. Throw them in there. And if you want to save them to the end, that's fine as well. The last section is what I call the challenge section. Obviously, the T is the threats and SWOT. I don't like the word threats, especially when it's personal, but I just want to be clear that this can be both internal and external, okay? Sometimes we think of threats, we think of, something, causing us danger that's, removed from us, but they can be internal challenges, okay? As well as external ones. And so, this is kind of very interesting, and it's like how well do companies understand or even know what you bring to the table. Now, I work a lot with veterans. I work a lot with older individuals like myself, and a lot of times the experiences that we have or they have, they don't translate very well to the job description, or the organization doesn't really know them very well. Especially when I work with veterans who have totally different, in military, have totally different nomenclature. You may have been responsible for, $50 to $200 million worth of quote unquote work, and yet it doesn't translate over to what it may look like in the civilian world. And so how do you navigate around that? I mean, what do you need to do in order to get them to understand what you actually can bring to the table? Same thing for those that may be of older age, 50 plus. Even now I'm hearing 40s and 30s plus, right? I'll talk about myself. I'm in my 60s. And so I have what they call an iceberg career and an iceberg resume, which essentially means that, we're told only to show the first 10 to 15 years of our experience. And yet there's another 25 years beneath that, right? So how do I convey that? How do I make that available to a prospective employer that may be only interested in this part of my, the last part of my career? And so you have to be aware of how to work around these things, what that challenge may look like, and how you're able to overcome it. The other piece of it is, and as we know, is technologies threaten your current and future roles. I just read recently that automation is up across the United States. It's just, it's taking over. The pandemic has, don't get me wrong, I know that it was coming anyway, but the one thing the pandemic has brought out is that, what do we do if we want to try to avoid human interaction, right? Not to say that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's there. You know, as somebody who worked in the media, I can tell you that the roles and positions I had in the broadcasting world have been completely replaced, or the people that worked in those roles have been completely replaced by automation. So again, how is technology, either not just threatening your current roles, but how is it impacting it? And how are you working? How are you preparing yourself for it? Is it a different coding language? Is it a different set of skills that you currently have that you may be made obsolete in the next 6, 12, 18 months? Those are the things you may need to take into consideration. And then finally, and this is really the toughest for some folks, is that, is there anything that you personally do that could hold you back? And do you even know about that? Now, in my book, I share a story about an individual that I work with, extremely competent, extremely successful now. And there was just, there was a little bit of quirkiness in the personality or some of the things that they did. And, even though it wasn't a game changer, so to speak, it did kind of diminish a little bit some of their credibility in some ways. And so, having someone to work with them and let them know that was a situation that they might, or an action that they might want to correct. At first it was very awkward to have that conversation, but they felt great, there was gratitude in it, and they managed it, right? And again, I want to be absolutely clear here. I'm not asking anybody to change who they are. I said that from the very beginning, this is really about you. And so I'm not asking or telling anyone that they need to change. But if you find that you have, if you're not getting where you want to be in your career, and you feel like something may be holding you back, and you have those folks in your life that are willing to share that information with you and give you some idea with that, listen to it. Sometimes it could be something as simple as somebody swearing all the time, or they never look at anybody when they talk, or some things just like that. Or if there's anything that, just even sometimes the littlest things make the biggest of differences. And so I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions in the chat. Okay. And so I'm going to go through a series of next steps, things that you might want to take into consideration. So the first step is, and I've referenced this several times, is, find that person or persons in your life that, one, are invested in your future, two, will tell you that there's something stuck in your teeth, and three, could be a sounding board for you, right? Someone that truly is not there to criticize you, someone there that's actually there to, to not just to pump you up sake, but is really there to try to help you, right? And I do like the word spotter, because anybody that's ever lifted weights or works out knows that a spotter is not to take the weight off you. The spotter is there to not only is to protect you, but also to help you, feel what it feels like to get it lifted up and above. So that's the first thing that I would take into consideration. Second piece is obviously complete personal SWOT analysis. We went through the steps. It doesn't take that long. I will tell you that I do one at least once or twice a year. I usually do mine around Christmas time, just a time of reflection. I just sit there and I write, and I sometimes I come up with like anywhere from 7 to 10 pages of handwritten, not completely handwritten pages, and it gives me some time. It gives me a kind of a good spot to kind of take a look at myself. I mean, that's the one thing that, it'll be in this slide coming up here, but I don't like to just assume that everything is going well. I just want to make sure that I'm accounting for all those things that have gone well over the past year or past 6 months. The big piece of this is that, once you've done all this, you really need to put together a plan on how to best take advantage of this, not just your strengths, but also your opportunities, and then minimize any of your areas for improvements or challenges, right? Because doing all this without a plan of action, it just sits there, right? It doesn't, a lot of times you'll see folks, if you're in the business world, they'll make strategic plans, and it'll take 2 years to make, and they'll sit on the shelf for 5 years, right? You don't want to do that. Everything that you do going on for your career should be about ownership, right? Which means that it's actionable. You want to be able to have forward momentum, right? Because I got to tell you that when you own something, it's contagious. It's contagious in all aspects of your life, and you're going to want to do these things. And this is the other piece of it is that you do have to commit. So the ownership piece is a real big part of it. make a commitment. And I'm not a big believer in like having 45 goals, right? I'm a believer in 3. So if you have up to 3, that's fine. If you have 1 that you can do, that's fine as well. I will tell you that I have a tendency not to make things too easy and also not too hard, right? Because what you'll find is that if it's too easy, then you'll delay in doing it. And if you make it too hard, then you might just get discouraged that you don't achieve it. So find that balance between difficulty and the ability to achieve it, right? And that's a personal choice, and that's something you're going to have to do on your own. Another big step, and this is really, really tough for a lot of folks, and this is what I find, especially in the areas of opportunity, especially in the areas of learning about your strengths, your areas for improvement, your opportunities and your challenges, is asking for help. I cannot tell you how many times I've dealt with folks and they've come to talk to me, and it's not too late, but it's almost like they've gone through a lot of angst along the way when all they needed to do is to reach out and ask for it. You will be surprised, especially if you've got this strong network of support, that folks will be glad to help you. A lot of times the information is available to you, and you don't have to struggle. You don't have to suffer in silence. That's probably one of my biggest takeaways from next steps, is that when in doubt, reach out. That would be the one thing that I would say to do, in addition to the rest of the things on the slides. And this just kind of tells you that this process is a reiteration, right? Iterative, right? You have to continually go through this. You don't have to do it every day of the week. I don't want you to think, oh my gosh, this is going to be something that's going to consume my time. But using the analogy of the strategic plan, this cannot be a one and done. Constantly review this, even if it's on a quarterly basis. Like I said, I do it semi-annual, but even if you did that cadence, that's fine. But just think about it and just go back to it. And you'll find not only will it be a good exercise to do, but a lot of times, especially for myself, is it validates the things that I did throughout the year. It gives me a sense of like accomplishment, which I think is a big part of what we do. And then I'll leave you with this. Any of you watched The Last Dance with Michael Jordan? I thought this quote was something that was really interesting. So I'll just pause and give you some time to read it. Okay. All right. So before we get to the Q&A, I did want to share these additional resources. These are things that actually you can get from the public library. They are free. Those strength finders, if you do want to do the survey, which I strongly recommend, you'll have to pay for the book, and I think it's like less than $10. But Innovation U is one of the most referred books, and I'm not a big believer in referring books to folks, but when folks are really kind of struggling a little bit on trying to figure out their next career path and what they want to do, I actually tell them to read this book, which wasn't really designed for career transitioning or career work. It is a great book. There's a lot. I am never amazed about someone who I tell to read this will come back to me and go, oh my gosh, they'll quote me a chapter. It's a quick read. It's literally about a 6 to 8 hour read. I've read it on flights that are, from Seattle to New York. And also there's a free assessment that you can actually go onto the website and use. And it's very helpful. I'm a big believer in assessments, not all assessments, but assessments overall. The other book is Working Identity. And again, another really good book. You can get it free at the library. It really kind of helps you kind of shape your thoughts around career transitioning, career pathing. It's very well written. Abera is often quoted, but nobody really knows her outside of kind of the L&D world and the career coaching world. But again, a good book that I would recommend. And then finally, Strength Finders. You can get the book for free, but if you buy it, there's a code in there that you can actually use to get your 5 strengths. And they actually, it's like you can get up to like 35 of them, but they'll give you 5 for free. And this is a book that I've used when I worked, especially in the government world, military world. And it's really helped a lot of folks understand or get kind of a bearing of their strengths that they may not have considered. It's very scientific. It's a nice read, by the way. And also, it doesn't really take that long for it. And there's a lot of eye openers in this book for some folks, especially for those who really believe that they're one way and find out that maybe they do have these strengths that they weren't aware of. And so, again, great resources to follow up on them. Almost all of them are free, and I would really truly recommend it for anyone who is, maybe struggling a little bit about what to do next or where to go. And with that said, I'm at the end here. This is the Q&A section. There's my contact information. I've listed 3 ways to contact me. I am open. Please, you can email me. You can IM me through LinkedIn. I am more than happy to talk to anyone. Just remember I'm on the West Coast if you're on the East Coast. But please, I make that offer to you. Here's a link to the book this webinar is based upon, the IEEE-USA. And if you're interested, I do work for the University of Phoenix. If you're interested in learning about the university, there's their link right there. And also you can use the QR code. So I will just stop here for a second and see if there are any questions, Jonathan.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bob, for the great presentation. So folks, we will now get to some of your questions that our viewers have asked throughout the webinar. Bob, here's the first question. Kelly asks, my strengths and weaknesses may be very different from how others see me. How do I get feedback?
That is a great question. I would say, I think the question to answer the question is actually in the question. So I would say this for Kelly is that, if you have a good network of contacts, I would just ask them. I mean, and you could phrase the questioning differently. I personally, I'll just do it this way. I often ask folks, what do they feel? What do they think that what do I bring to the table? I mean, what do you see my strengths are? And I will even give you a bizarro scenario here. I've actually done this with my children. I have 4 kids, and I actually asked one of my sons, I asked him if I was a good dad. I mean, and my son was kind of perplexed by the question, and he said, yeah, why are you asking that? And then I said, well, why? And that's the big thing, is that you want to know why, because I think that's going to help you in your perception, right? Because perceptions are just that, right? They're based upon past experiences, things that people have done or felt or, have happened to them before. So you want to ask the why question. It's not just enough to ask, what are my strengths? And people start rattling off. You're organized, you're polite, you're X, Y, and Z. Ask them why. Same thing with, the weaknesses or areas of improvement. Like if you really believe that you're a great listener and someone doesn't, then you might want to ask them so can you give me some examples of what that may look like? And that may help you get a better frame of reference and also help with the distortion of the perceptions, right? So hopefully they answer the question. If not, Kelly, give me another one or just reach out to me and I'm more than happy to take it offline with you.
Thanks, Bob. And this next question kind of follows up from that. Mark asks, would it be good to have outside opinions on your SWOT?
Yes, that is a great question. So I'm a big believer in socializing your SWOT and also, to tell you the truth, your IDPs, which is your individual development plans, which I don't talk about. And the reason why I like to do that is because, one, I do let other folks look at it that, again, are invested in my success. And I do that because there's something about sharing your vision and your goals out loud. It's okay to have them to yourself. I mean, I'm a big believer in vision boards. I put my goals and my visions up there, and I look at it's not just words, it's pictures and things, and it helps ground me. It's kind of like my North Star, so to speak, my compass. But I think it's a really great idea if you're comfortable doing that to socialize that. I think it's, one, it helps to see if you're missing something, and two, it lets others know that you're taking the steps to, to make improvements or to actually refine or validate the things that you really want to work on. So it's a great question. That's a great question. And quite frankly, I'm going to write that down and stick it in my next book.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bob. So this next question, William asks, how do you deal with the weakness of being on the upper end of the age scale in an era of ageism?
Boy, that is another great question. In fact, I'm actually ready to do a national presentation on ageism in July. So I will tell you this. The one thing that I've had to learn to do, and it's just been through trial and error, is that I'm not trying to change the perception of everyone that's older, right? Meaning that I'm not trying to change the mind or the perception of ageism of the individual or organization that I'm trying to work with. I'm trying to change their perception of me. And so one of the things that I do is, and I've just experienced this just recently, is that I was having a dialogue with somebody, and I could tell that they picked up right away that I was a little bit older, right? So like I said, I have an iceberg resume. I'm also a little bit different on paper because I didn't get my bachelor's degree until I was like 35. So I picked up like 12 years of age. I'm younger, if you try to, that's the little tricks people use, that they look at your resume and see when you graduated, and then they try to determine how old you are. The other things that people try to do in ageism is that they, ask you questions. They use, coded dialogue, like sophisticate, well, we're not really looking for someone sophisticated or seasoned or anything like that. And so the way that I try to work around with it is that I try to get them to look at me as an individual. So if I can sense that there may be some hesitancy to hire an older person, I use phrases like, that determine that I'm very active. So I'll say things like, hey, I'm looking to become a long-term key contributor, because the other perception about older workers is that they're going to leave, right? They're going to retire, they're going to run away. The other perception is that, we're going to, that we're sickly, that we're going to require, medical treatment every other day. And so I try to project, some type of vitality in my dialogue. Some simple things like, for example, even if I do write a cover letter or do something like that, there's this concept that if you're older, you use 2 spaces after your period for your next sentence. So you might just go to 1 because that's the contemporary way to look at it. But I think the way around it is to not try to change their perception about that whole population, get them to change the perception about you. And quite frankly, if I'm working for an organization that wants to discriminate on or wants to practice ageism, then I'm not going to work for them anyway, right? And I know that folks don't have that choice, but that would be my answer. I'm sorry I was so long-winded. And please talk to me about it if you like.
Thanks, Bob. So one of our viewers by the name of CV asks, in the workplace, I can tell you that we have a SWOT, but when CV asked the team and manager to fill it out, only one person made inputs. Who can engage in this work environment?
Well, it should be so hopefully I'm perceiving the question because I can't read it. I'm gonna look up ahead here. It's on a different screen, sorry.
I believe this was a rhetorical question.
Okay.
Possibly.
Well, I think that it's, this should be for everyone. If the question is that, who should be doing this, I would say everyone should be doing this. I don't think whether you're a CEO or somebody that started, at the bottom, so to speak, I think it's really a good exercise, because really what you're trying to accomplish in this is really to kind of take an inventory of your skill set and determine which skills are transferable. That's one. And the other piece of it is to figure out, where are my gaps, right? So what do I do really well? What is preventing me from being even better, right? So that's the one piece of it. The second thing I would say is that, if rhetorical or not, I will push on this because I've been up the chain and, not all the way up, but pretty far up. And I will tell you that it begins with leadership, so I think leaders need to set examples. I think that is probably one of the things that, when I work with organizations, it becomes very apparent from the very beginning. It can't be, don't say as I do as I say, something like that. Do as I do, say as I do. I always mix up that. You've got to lead by example. You've got to be visible. You've got to set the precedent. And, you've got to let people know that this is the type of culture that is going to be very creative, very innovative, very, healthy, for lack of a better word. So that's the way that I would address that question.
Fantastic answer. Thanks, Bob. Kamal asks, how do you create strategic contacts to get into those 70% job sectors?
That's a really good question. It really begins one step at a time. I think, this is what I tell folks. I live up here in Seattle. Mount Rainier it's poked its head out right now, right? And I know a lot of people that talk about climbing it. And as much as they talk about climbing it, every day when I talk to them, they just stare at it, right? And so, after about 100 days, and you haven't moved an inch, you're no closer to climbing the mountain than you were when you first mentioned it. So it begins really with the first step. So just don't try to get 150 contacts in the first 2 weeks. Just build on one and then build on another and build on another. And it's better to have, 4 or 5 really good ones than have 100 that are, kind of loosely connected. But you could do that through a variety of ways. I mean, you have the association right here with the, IEEE-USA, right? There's a lot of members. In fact, I read that the IEEE itself and worldwide, it's got 421,000 members or something like that. That's pretty huge. And if you just do simple math and think that if only I got 1% of 1% of 1% of 1%, that's a good number of people that you can reach out, that you could possibly, get from this volume of an association. But there are other aspects in your life too, or other places you can get it. LinkedIn allows folks to say that they're open to have people connect with them, that they'll share their wisdom and knowledge and experiences with them. So there's a choice right there. Your coworkers, your family, friends, you'd be shocked about how many times, I have 4 children, they're all grown. They have contacts in the companies they work in, and I'm often surprised about who they know and, where there may be likenesses. Also, volunteering is another way. I sit on multiple boards, again, I have that luxury to do that, but I've made a lot of contacts to that. And quite honestly, if you're the type of contact that gives back, meaning that you're just not there to collect a name, ask for a favor and walk away, you will be surprised about someone that you'll know that'll actually know someone else that says that they should connect you to them. I've had that happen multiple times this year alone, where I did not know this other individual, and I had 2 other people say that we should connect, and we met, and it made a strong connection, and we're working on projects. So, it takes a little bit of leap of faith. You have to have a little bit of a plan. When I was thinking about transitioning from broadcasting the media to digital media, which totally different fields, though the concepts were pretty the same, I just did informational interviews. I found people that are out in the field. I was going to school at the time. I was an older person. I found folks that were in the industry. I reached out to them and said, look, I'm thinking about making this transition. I really like to understand what you do for, what you do and how that may look like. Not everybody returned my reply, but some people did, and I sat down with them, and that's how we built contact. So hopefully that helps. And you can connect with me. So you have my contact information. If you want to start with that works as well. So
fantastic, thank you. So Eric asks, Eric has a strengths question. How do I get through the noise of 100 applicants for a job?
I'm assuming they're speaking for themselves, like what makes them stand out?
Yes, yes.
That's, wow, that's a tough question because you don't know what you're up against. I would say this, look at the job description and then go out and use like LinkedIn or any kind of search tools and try to find people that have that position. See what they have, see if they've, I'll give you a really good example. When I wanted to get into performance coaching, I, thought that my experience would be enough to kind of get me through it. And I found that I didn't have the nomenclature down a little bit. I can get the certs and everything else along with it. So what I did is that I went on LinkedIn and I looked at people who were in the performance coaching aspect. And then I started to see their posts and I started to see the things that they had done. For example, one of them wrote an article on like performance coaching in a particular sector, and they used a lot of different examples and ideas. And it gave me an idea of like what really stood out. And so I incorporated that in my resume and also in my cover letter. I just did something a little bit different. I just kind of shaped it a little bit different. Like asked a question, I think in the cover letter, then I don't think I would have asked. And also I created on my resume, I actually added some of the terminology in it. And, I don't know if it helped me stand out, but it did get me an interview. The other thing that makes this a little bit challenging, and so I'm a little bit hesitant on my answer, is that when you talk about ATS, which is the application tracking software, unfortunately, it looks for keywords, and I'm not a big fan of it, but a lot of organizations have gone to that model. So the other thing you can do is you can do it for free, is that you can take your resume and then you can take the job description and you can upload your resume and upload the job description, and then it'll actually kick out a percentage match. And you can see how much of a percentage that you match to it. And you might want to start to tweak some of the verbiage and the words that you use inside that resume to make yourself stand out. Now, if it's in person, then your personality and then your knowledge and your willingness and how interactive you are will make you stand out. But getting through that gate is a tough time, but it's not impossible.
Great, thank you. This next comment, not so much a question, but is an interesting perspective I thought worth highlighting. I think it follows up on the ageism. William says, perhaps age is not a weakness, but rather a threat or a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I've never considered it a weakness whatsoever. This is a different forum, and I'm not going to go down this path. But we do know that there's bias in hiring, right? It's across the board, unintentional, intentional. It exists, and so I think the key, what I have learned is that some folks are intimidated by it. I mean, we live in a different world, and it's really how that you either set that level of expectation or how comfortable that you make that person feel. And again, I don't want people to just, throw themselves at other folks and acquiesce, so to speak, and always feel like they're, selling themselves short. I don't ask folks to do that. As I mentioned before, it's that you need to establish that connection with them and not necessarily with your particular population. Okay. And, to do that, it just, like I said, I use words like I want to be a long-term key contributor, because I really do, right? I really want to be a good teammate. And if I'm going to be in a leadership position, I want to be clear that I want to, this is the type of leader that I am. Not necessarily because of how old I am or how young I am, but more or less it's like, what am I going to do? I mean, what am I going to do to change the trajectory of the organization, right? Because we do know this, regardless of, whatever choice anybody makes, organizations want to know two things, right? They want to know, can you make them money or can you save them money, right? And if you can do both, then you're probably a good choice for them to hire. And so you need to demonstrate where the value is for them to bring you on board. And also flush things out a little bit, sometimes you could tease out a little bit of what the concern is. I ask a really odd question in an interview when they ask me if I have any questions, and I've done it a couple of times and it's been perceived differently every time I've done it. I ask them, is there anything about what we've talked about today that makes you pause to think about hiring me? And it's a very awkward question, right? And it puts them on the spot. And sometimes they'll go, no. And sometimes they'll go, well, that's an odd question. Why would you ask that? And I said, well, I just want to know if I've answered the questions the way you want, or if there's anything that's right now that's kind of sitting with you that I didn't answer. And when you get that, when you have that kind of response, somebody will share that, it used to be about ageism, was that there was a concern about you fitting in, not just work-wise, but also socializing, right? How is a 60-year-old going to hang out, work well with 30-year-olds, right? And that could be a concern, I'm sure, but if the job's remote now, and if you're not in those same, that's the one thing that we're hearing, is that a lot of positions have become, for a lot of older adults, it's become more virtual. So that socialization piece isn't there, right? They're not going to be concerns about hanging out with me or wondering, whether or not I'm watching this on Netflix or not, right? So again, there's a lot of ways to work around this, but I'm a big believer in just putting it right out on the table. Of course, you don't do it on day one, right? You try to do it, after you've established some rapport, and you'll be surprised. You'll get some answers.
Fantastic, thank you. Philip asks, is changing industries an example of a potential threat, where the industry you're trying to enter doesn't understand what you did or the benefit you may bring?
Yeah, that kind of blends to one of my points in it. So I have, I've transitioned, I don't know, 10 times. It's very difficult sometimes, especially if the industry you're moving into is very intrinsic or very specialized or new. For example, when I transitioned or tried to transition from broadcasting back right before the turn of the century, to date myself, to digital media, I remember, going to these career fairs and showing my resume and then looking at it, not even reading it, and go, well, it looks like you've got experience in project management. And I'm like, there's no project management experience there. And then, I did get really a very, very kind, I should say, recruiters look at my resume and said, you got a lot of experience here, but right now, I don't think we're ready for it. It doesn't translate well. And, then I asked why. I said, well, why is that? And is there anything I could do to work around that? And so she gave me some advice. I took it, and, I was hired eventually from the same organization, different recruiter, different person. So yeah, it can be a challenge, especially if we see this a lot with veterans when they try to get into the civilian world. It doesn't translate well. So sometimes you have to take that step to help them translate. I tell folks that the best way to work around that is to really try to understand their world, learn everything you can about that organization, and then translate what you've done to theirs. And if anybody's ever applied at Amazon or worked at organizations where they use kind of the STAR format, STAR interview, which is situational, task, action, and results, they're going to ask a lot of questions. And, it's not about, they're not really interested that you did X and Y to their X and Y. What they want to see is, what did you do? Like, for example, analytics is big in Amazon. So if you can demonstrate that you've used analytics to solve a problem in your current world and how that can be transferable into their world, you can overcome that. But yes, it can be definitely can be a challenge to do that.
Great, thank you. Ed asks, how do you work around an iceberg challenge?
You mean as far as the resume being, I don't have context, but I'm assuming that, you've got a lot of experience. You're only being asked to show the first 10 to 15. Sorry, my screen's jumping up here. Again, I think it's just it's really trying to understand what they need and getting to the point where you can discuss your skills, your experiences, your knowledge, and how it applies into their world. Using those kind of examples, to it. I'll give you one that hopefully kind of helps. So I was in my 50s when I transitioned from higher education to, I transitioned from the media to higher ed. And I was asked this question. It was how I was going to be, it was a really high level position in academics, and I never was in academics before. And so they asked me, so how can you, as someone who's never managed faculty before, think you can manage faculty now, right? And again, on my resume, I only showed like 10 years of it. And so I said, well, it's a great question. Obviously on my resume, I don't show that, but I can tell you as someone who is, worked with on-air talent, when you're, paying them hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and then they, have questions about their $10,000 quarterly clothing allowance and have to navigate that. I said, if I can manage that group, I think I can certainly manage faculty. And they were like, oh, okay. It's hard. I mean, you're really hoping, this is my dream is that you work for an organization, or you try to work in an organization that understands that people bring a lot more than just what's written on their resume, right? There's a lot of skills and a lot of experiences that a lot of us bring that a lot of folks don't really want to, talk or share about, talk or want to know about. But if I was hiring, and I do hire, I look for folks that not only have, I don't just hire people for the position they have that I'm looking for today. I also hire people for positions that I might have in the future. And so that's the cue that you have to get them to, right? You have to get them to recognize that, you bring more to the table, that you're going to be able to help them achieve their goals, their organizational goals, their professional goals, and also your own, and that there's value in learning more about you. And the way that you share that is how it ties to their world. So.
Absolutely. Great insight. So, Bob, I think we have time for a couple more questions.
I'm here for you guys.
So let's see. Robert asks, how to deal with required relevant job references in an industry you haven't been in for 30 years? I'm in software development, and I want to return to CAD, CAM, solid modeling, etc. Okay,
so I'm assuming that you've been out of it and now you want to go back into it. Is that the way you're reading the question, Jonathan?
That seems to be the case, yes.
So the references are going to be older. Unless the tech has changed. First off, I mean, I'm familiar, but I'm not really familiar with the tech. What the tech of it is. The tech would be, if you can demonstrate that you've been keeping up to date in your skill sets, regardless if it's been stuff that you've been doing paid, getting compensated for, or not getting compensated for. That would be one step. The second step is that if they're looking for references that can vouch for that, and there's a little bit of gray here, but most times when people give references, they usually don't say, or they don't have to say that, oh, I knew John 35 years ago. They could just say that just have them talk to your competency and the skill set. So if you've been very competent in what you've done in the past, and the skills and the tech and all those things are relevant, or you can make that connection, then that's probably what the approach I would take. I wouldn't try to date yourself on that. That's not going to do them any good, and it's not going to do you any good. I mean, look, I started managing, in the 90s, and if I was to ask somebody to give me a reference that I managed in the 90s, and it was in the 2020s, unless things have really gone downhill pretty quick, or fast or whatever, I think the reference would be relevant. If that's my only reference, right? So if those are your only references, then I would just get them to, talk to your strengths as far as the tools and the software and the work that you delivered. The years really shouldn't make a difference. And if they really want to know that, then I would question that a little bit, like why, especially if you can establish relevancy right now.
Awesome.
That was a tough question.
And here's our final question. Kamal asks, I feel shy to talk to people, and I feel I don't really know many people. How can I really create networks?
I just did a I just did a webinar on this, and you know what? It's okay to be shy. That's that's okay. It's okay to feel uncomfortable doing it. Just start slowly. Just have a conversation with somebody about liked shared interests, right, and then build from that. That's that respect. I mean, I think that's the biggest fear, especially when it comes to meeting people. We think that we immediately have to establish this, lifelong relationship, and that doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes you just have to take a slow step, and just find, either find a group that you work with. I mean, if you like to game, or you have a small circle of friends, or if you're just reaching out, just start with an interest. For example, I really wanted to understand a little, like I said, the performance management piece. And I talked a little bit about, using that example, but I actually reached out to somebody that I saw give a webinar on. And I just reached out to them and I said, look, I thought you were an incredible presenter. I'm just curious if you could share some insight on, from your perspective in dealing with performance management in an industrial environment, right? And the person sent me a note back, and they were like, hey, I'd love to talk, or how would you like to do this, email or video or phone call? And, it was a little awkward, right? Because I didn't know them, but I started really slow, and I set my expectations, right? I always try to keep things, one of the things I tell folks when I want to talk with them is that, look, I just need 20 minutes of your time. And I keep to it, right? And then I'll even say at the 20-minute mark, I say, look, I've taken up too much of your time right now. Thank you. And they'll go, no, stay. So just think, aim small, go big. I think it is the word, aim tall, shoot small, or something like that. But if you start small, you should be able to just establish that. And the other thing too is, and this is this crazy thing I've told folks that are really, not very, they more be on the passive side and on kind of the shy side is, I tell them to do this exercise, and it sounds crazy, but you're just gonna have to listen to me. I tell them to walk outside their house, walk into a field, go to the ocean, whatever, and just scream, right? Yell, ah! And I let them do that. And I know it sounds crazy, but what it does is just shows that you do have an inner voice. You do have something inside of you that needs to get out, right? And that helps you. I mean, if you could do that, how hard can it be? How much harder could it be to just have a simple conversation with somebody, either through chat or whatever? We all bring value, okay? And that's the takeaway today. We all have something good inside of us that we can share. And so I understand it's more difficult. I'm an extrovert, as you can tell, but even I sometimes will sit in the corner and be a little bit shy and feel a little awkward about it. But if you don't take that first step, just a little step, you'll never be close to that mountain I talked about climbing. So, and again, you can reach out to me. We could start small if you like. So that's it.
Absolutely. Fantastic insight, Bob. Thank you. Well, folks, unfortunately, we are out of time. We had a lot of great questions that unfortunately we weren't able to get to. If you would like, you can reach out to Bob directly. His contact information has been provided on the screen. Bob, thank you so much for joining us today and giving our audience your tips into a successful career transitioning process.
Thank you. And if you, like I said, read the quote. This is not impossible. You can do it. I believe in you. You probably do this every day. You don't even realize it. So, one step at a time will get you to where you want. So thank you. Thanks everyone for being here today.
Absolutely. And thank you everyone for attending today's live stream webinar. As mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, IEEE-USA's goal is to create programming that's valuable, relevant, and of interest to you. And as such, we will be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. We value your opinion and would appreciate if you could take a few minutes and share your thoughts. If you'd like to get a copy of Dr. Bob Danielle's first career transitioning book, go to our shop, which the link to it has been provided below as well as on the screen. It is free for IEEE members and for a small fee for non-members. Check back daily on our social media for future live stream updates, and we hope you all have a great rest of your day.